Welcome to 2,000 years of history. The past is everywhere in York. Its ancient streets are wrapped in walls that protect the spirit of the city. Yet it's also a quirky and playful place, put on the map, of course, as the starting point for the second stage of the 2014 Tour de France. Come with me as I spend 48 hours in York.
In 2 days you can get to know this alluring city, finding a characterful place to stay on any budget, exploring the narrow streets that have defied development and tasting the flavours that York has made its own. The centre, wrapped within age-old walls, is steeped in history and intrigue. This is a city full of stories. These days the walls are no longer needed to defend York, and the city makes strangers welcome.
All railway lines lead to York. That's only a slight exaggeration. Of course, York Station is the halfway point on the East Coast Main Line from London to Edinburgh, but there's also fast links from right across the country. Wherever you start, you can probably get here quickly and easily by train. Visit York is open 7 days a week, among other things for the sale of the York Pass, which gives you discounts on all kinds of cafes and restaurants and admission free to over 30 attractions. The 2-day version costs £48. Big value, small card. Now, here's a thing. For a 20% discount on the cost of a York Pass, book your accommodation through visityork.org. The city has so many places to stay, starting with a serviced apartment close to York Minster. The owners of this place do know how to organise a property in a brewery. This lovely space was created in 2010 from industrial premises. I love many things about it, including the main bedroom. Lovely, huge amounts of space, like living in a loft apartment. And if you're travelling with children or other annoying relations, come and see where you can put them. I also love the location, just a couple of minutes walk from York Minster. And I love the price. For all of this, for 2 nights, sleeping up to 4 people, I'm paying less than £300 in total. As the Romans used to say above their places of residence, si vales valio. If you're happy, I'm happy. It still says that here, and I am happy. Hope you are. Elegant, indulgent, perfectly preserved. No, not me, Middlethorpe Hall. This 3-century-old manor house is just 2 miles from the city walls. In its time, it served as a boarding school and a nightclub, but not both at once. Today, it's a hotel and spa.
The character of Middlethorpe Hall was strong enough to tempt the leading French hotelier Lionel Chattard to become the general manager. What does he love about it?
It really feels like you are in a country house, you are part of a house party. I mean, a lot of people comment, and it's a bit trendy to say that, but it's like Downton Abbey. You sit down and it's a traditional old-fashioned English service, and I think that's quite important, and it's one of those few places where you find this traditional old-fashioned service, and we're very proud of doing that.
It's grand, it's old, it's the Duke of York suite. Come and have a look at the rest. Middlethorpe Hall gets quite a lot of royalty, and this is where they tend to stay. But you don't need a title, credit card will do. But if you're in danger of reaching your credit limit, then how about another historic property, Micklegate House, known these days as Ace York, the boutique hostel. A bed in a dorm here will cost you as little as £16 a night. If you sleep for 8 hours, that's only £2 an hour. Bargain. As soon as you arrive in York, you can take a view deep into the past. The layers of history greet you. The original city was founded in AD 71 when the Roman 9th Legion arrived and made this the capital of northern Britain. Iberacum, they called it, and they laid the foundations for the walls which still ring around the city and created this multangular tower, the greatest piece of Roman architecture still here. But York wasn't built in a day. For a few centuries it was all quiet on the northern front, relatively speaking, until the year 866.
Hello there, welcome to the Viking Centre. My name's Fastov. Come on inside, let's get you on the Viking ride.
Beginning in 1976, the York Archaeological Trust spent 5 years rediscovering the Viking city of Jorvik as it stood a millennium ago. Then the Jorvik Viking Centre was created on the site of the excavations. After the ride, my new friend Fastov told me that the Vikings didn't spend their whole time looting and pillaging.
These are people who are very much like you and me. I think the common misconception is that a Viking is a race of people. Viking is a job title. So if you are a Viking, you are a pirate, a raider of the coast. But once they've settled down, they're farmers, they're merchants, they're craftsmen, and that's what we really try and seek to explore here, because by finding this kind of everyday street, as it were, we get this unique glance into what it was day to day to be an Anglo-Scandinavian, which is what we're kind of really examining here.
One of York's most appealing features is the range of independent and enticing places to eat and shop, sometimes both at the same time. In 2008, Sue Hardy created a delicatessen called the Hairy Fig, with the slogan, "Purveyor of fine fodder." So what are Sue's particular favourites?
The balsamics, the aged balsamics is definitely my favourites. Just changes everything, a few drops of that, few drops. It just makes a simple thing fantastic. It's just lovely. So it's different, it's all natural, it gets people back into tasting food. So yeah, when they come back, refill it up, have a different one, taste it before they go, and you know, lovely gifts.
Tea for 10. That's how many places there are here, so get here early.
York's inner core is just made for window shopping, with a 19th century feel and loads of independent retailers offering, well, Victorian value and all sorts of things you didn't realise you needed.
Shambles! No, not my dress sense, but the most celebrated shopping street in York, whose name was given when it was lined with butchers' shops. These days you can get anything you want here, as long as it's twine, tea or something twee. York has a proper city market with fresh fish from Bridlington, Scarborough and Whitby. And also, if you need those essential cheeses, conserves and chutneys from Yorkshire, this is the place to be. Now, here's a shop you don't see in every British high street. This is Demijohn's, and the idea is to bring back the bodega concept to Britain, where you have these wonderful jars full of all kinds of strange drinks, such as organic elderberry vodka, and you've got your bottle and you just top it up. Well, not you actually, it's not quite self-service.
The streets of York are constantly intriguing, whether you're shopping for souvenirs or searching for spirits.
The thing about York is it's full of history, mystery, folklore, legends. And I think because the buildings are still here, the people remember its history. Anything unusual happens, it's known of, it's remembered.
Mark Graham runs the original Ghost Walk of York, which claims to be the oldest ghost tour in the world, founded more than 40 years ago.
Outside here, over 1,000 people are recorded to have hanged for murder, for theft, soldiers, killers, fools, lunatics, unfortunates, innocents and occasional witches. And some of their kind of ghosts, their stories, their shadows are left behind. One famous one was a man called Eugene Aram, who was hanged outside behind us here in 1730. He was said to be a murderer. And he's also said by some to have murdered his own cellmate the week he was to hang. But ever since, there's been kind of a cold chill in the room. He's said to return every now and again at certain dates. There is, of course, the tower opposite, Clifford's Tower. And it's named after Roger Clifford, who was hanged in a cage on the outside in 1322. No food, no water, and no clothes. On moonlit nights, some say they can still see his body dangling there.
As you wander through York's chillingly atmospheric streets, the Ghost Tour transports you back in time to the lost souls who helped to build the city.
It's with the Romans that we have a very famous ghost story indeed. It all occurred to a friend of mine called Harry Martindale, who, way back in 1953, was working in this house behind me, deep underground, when he said he saw from the wall in front of him 20 Roman soldiers. And years later, they did a massive archaeological dig underneath the Minster, and they found all these Roman remains, just knee depth. And they also found all the weapons and clothes exactly like what he claimed to have seen. It is one of Britain's great ghost stories. It's a great face to finish.
So deeply imbued in York life is the supernatural that there's even a ghost ale. Dark and full-bodied, it's described as, which doesn't actually sound like a ghost to me. But there's all sorts of strange things happening here, because this might look like a pub. Josh might look like a barman, but in fact, he is leading the tour of the York Brewery, and this is the private members club that's attached to it. And until I've taken the tour, I'm not classed as a member, so we better get on with it.
Let's do it.
Yorkshire has a proud tradition of brewing, and while the basic ingredients, malt, hops and water, remain exactly the same, modern technology makes it possible for microbreweries like this to experiment and innovate, creating new brews for 21st century drinkers.
Oh, thanks Josh, and thank you very much indeed for improving my understanding of hops with a giant leap, if you see what I mean. Very good tour. And at last, my pint of Ghost. Here's a slogan: don't drink spirit, drink Ghost. It's said that you could drink in a different pub in York every night for a year. I haven't actually counted, but there are many worse places to start than the Yorkshire Terrier, which looks as though it's been a pub all its life, but in fact is a 21st century conversion. Very good it looks too. But other venues are available. Thank you. Such as the Biltmore, which is a converted Methodist chapel, and it's the closest that York gets to New York. Time for dinner. They're the locals, and I'm dining at Cafe Concerto, which is in High Petergate, and a very sophisticated place which deals with local ingredients and great food.
Where possible, we do try and source everything locally. So most of our meat comes from a local butcher, and on this platter we've actually made the hummus ourselves, we roast the tomatoes ourselves, and the olives are done in our own rosemary and lemon and garlic marinade.
Well, there's such competition between pubs and restaurants in York that the visitor, like the local, is spoiled for choice, and you can expect great value and bonhomie. See you in church in the morning. Good morning. In the 14th century, York Minster was one of the most magnificent structures in Europe. In the 21st century, it still is.
The Minster is a masterpiece of English Gothic. Its foundations rest upon the remains of the Roman fortress, in a location where the first Christian church was built 14 centuries ago. York Minster has been in its present form for over 500 years and has proved a spiritual survivor and a blessing to visitors today.
York Minster isn't necessarily the most serene place of worship you've ever visited. For centuries it has been a work in progress, a magnificent fusion of craftsmanship and spirituality.
The latest installation, Orb, allows you to take a ground-level look at the stained glass windows that are normally to be found high above the congregation.
It's difficult to convey the scale of this magnificent building, so try this. The central tower is big enough to contain the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And talking of leaning, well, in the 1960s, York Minster had a bit of a problem.
The latest edition is Revealing York Minster, in which you explore the Undercroft, an underground area that didn't exist 50 years ago. In the 1960s, the pressure of 4,000 tons of stone on each of the 4 unstable ancient bases of the columns made the imminent collapse of the tower possible. Fortunately, the architects created this subterranean collar of concrete and steel to safeguard the Minster, and today the space has been filled with the story of the rescue mission and 2 millennia of worship. But how does the Minster reconcile the spiritual needs of the congregation with the wishes of sightseers like me? A question for Canon Michael Smith.
Well, everybody's welcome. That's at the core of what we're about. Whether you come to say your prayers or whether you come to, as a tourist, everyone is welcome. Part of our plan is that anyone who comes as a tourist might leave thinking, actually, I was a pilgrim. That actually they'll get a sense or have some kind of an encounter with something bigger than them that makes them go, wow, either physically or in their hearts at least, that they're lifted up in some way by their visit.
And for the high point of your visit, you can take a spiral staircase halfway to heaven. A view to lift the spirits. Thanks to York's spirituality, history and sheer good looks, it was chosen as the starting point for the 2014 Tour de France second stage. Now, inexplicably, I didn't make the cut for the world's greatest cycle race, but I am aware that 2 wheels is the best way to see beyond York's city centre.
I've an appointment with Sally White of Scoot Cycling Holidays, which offers guided tours of the city.
As you can see, cyclists just coming past us now. We've got a lot of cycle routes here that are devoted entirely to cyclists. Pedestrians are just on the side of us. There are cycle routes, there are paths along by the river, places where you're not going to meet traffic, so it's very safe, it's secure, and it's also flat. A lot of it is down to geography because York's located in the Vale of York, which is a very huge floodplain, so it's very flat. So anybody could cycle here, really.
A bike is the ideal form of transport for the narrow city streets, but even better are the banks of the River Ouse, providing great views at the same time as safe, gentle cycling. Stage 2 of Le Grand Départ of the Tour de France begins at the racecourse at Knavesmire, south of the city. Just beyond it is an intriguing installation, a scale model of the solar system, with the sun at the centre and planets spaced out proportionate to their distance from the sun. Back on planet York, the elegant Millennium Bridge provides a human-scale connection to the south of the city.
Marvellous! Oh. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
That was lovely. And of course, the Tour de France route continues all the way to sunny Sheffield. but I think it's well worth pausing here. I'm going to. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Here's a shrine to the sweeter things in life. It's part of the Betty's Tea Room Empire, a Yorkshire institution started, interestingly, by a Swiss immigrant. In 1936, Frederick Belmont travelled on the Queen Mary and was so impressed with the Art Deco style that he decided to open Betty's in York. Magnificent Art Deco surroundings, and where better to eat, if you want to, afternoon tea at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. You can, it's true. And here's one they kindly prepared earlier. Oh, look at this. Lovely sandwiches, beautiful scones, double cream and preserve, not jam. It's very posh here in Yorkshire. To make the most of your time in York, try to get ahead. Have your afternoon tea by 11s. From Betty's to Perney's. In the autumn of 2013, the top chef Andrew Pern opened this shiny new showcase to Yorkshire produce, Star in the City.
For the perfect brunch, what have we got on there? We've got Fortune's Kippers from Whitby, from the hometown. That's something that, you know, the American palate could be tested on. We've got haggis with duck egg and devil sauce. You've got the Great Fry Updale, which is actually a place up in the North Yorkshire Moors, which has got everything there. They've got bacon from the Ginger Pig, which again is known nationally. It's all going on. Black pudding, sausages. Take what you want. It's all good.
This is the only restaurant I've ever seen which has a warning on the menu, please refrain from wearing the bread basket. And when you're refreshed and replenished, you can step outside straight into the city's most intriguing gardens.
Venture beyond the walls on the north side of the city and you discover Museum Gardens, whose name gives a clue to what you might find here in the handsome shape of the Yorkshire Museum, devoted to a county that's almost another country.
Just because there's so much within the walls of York, don't rule out extramural activities, such as the wonderful Museum Gardens featuring St Mary's Abbey, once the richest monastery in the north of England. Question: which form of transport precipitated the greatest cultural, social and economic revolution the world has ever seen? Answer: the train. Happily, York is home to the world's biggest railway museum.
In the nation that brought railways to the world, York is the natural place to celebrate the tracks of our years. In 1976, this huge former steam locomotive depot became the home for, well, poetry in locomotion. Star of the show, Mallard, once the fastest machine on Earth. Bob Gwynn is Associate Curator of Railway Vehicles.
Well, steam was the way Britain created the wealth which we all enjoy. Steam was the symbol of the way Britain changed, and the best symbol of the steam age you can see, the most beautiful, the most elegant, is surely Mallard. This is the fastest steam locomotive in the world, and it's a world beater back then, and it's never been beaten, its record. So if you want to see one of the finest examples of engineering from the 1930s, well, come to the National Railway Museum and see Mallard.
In 1938, Mallard set the steam train record of 126 miles an hour. That's 1 mile an hour faster than the 21st century electric trains on the East Coast Main Line. The planet began to shrink in the 19th century. The railway remains the greatest ever people mover, the fast track to the future. As the National Railway Museum shows, Yorkshire's a very industrious county. But while down the road in Sheffield they were working with molten steel, here the city decided to go its own sweet way and work with molten chocolate. To find out why, well, what you need is York's newest attraction. It does what it says on the packet.
You're taken back to the days when the typical citizen worked either on the railways or in the chocolate factory, both involving transports of delight. It's a place to melt the hearts of chocolate lovers, and there are chocolatiers on hand to demonstrate the fine art of creating cocoa-based treats. But why York? Dougie Week can explain.
Well, cocoa was delivered along the river into Hull, through the Humber, into York. The Quakers moved in. The Roundtree family were Quakers. The Quakers favoured the cocoa industry because it offered their workers an alternative to strong drink. Hence, cocoa houses moved on from there into pastilles, into chocolate, to what we have today, one of the finest ranges of chocolates that you can possibly buy.
And some of the finest chocolatiers. Thank you, Dougie.
Thank you, Simon.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the taste of 48 hours in York, and that next time you're considering a city break, you do think about what the Romans, the Vikings, the Victorians, and indeed the 21st century citizens of York ever did for us. York's newest attraction, the Chocolate Story, tells the chocolate story of York. And here's the admission ticket.
It's upside down. Okay.
Oh.
Sorry.
That's all right.